It was just past dawn in Tel Aviv when the first sirens pierced the morning calm. Residents, still groggy from sleep, scrambled for shelter as the unmistakable roar of incoming missiles echoed overhead. Within seconds, the city's skyline lit up with flashes, some intercepted mid-air, others finding their mark. One of those targets, according to Iranian state media, was the Mossad's largest intelligence headquarters, a facility so secretive its exact location had long been debated among analysts. But this morning, that debate ended in fire. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility for the strike, calling it a calibrated retaliation for recent Israeli operations inside Iranian territory. The missiles, reportedly precision-guided, bypassed Israel's Iron Dome defense system, raising serious questions about the country's air defense capabilities. Eyewitnesses described a deafening explosion followed by a plume of smoke that rose hundreds of feet into the air. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but access was restricted, suggesting the site was not just sensitive, but potentially compromised. Israeli officials, while confirming the attack, downplayed its impact. No critical infrastructure was damaged, a spokesperson said, though satellite images circulating online told a different story. The compound, believed to house foreign operations planning and cyber intelligence units, appeared scorched and partially collapsed. For many Israelis, this wasn't just another missile strike. It was a psychological blow. The Mossad, long seen as untouchable, had been hit at its core. The timing of the attack was no coincidence. It came hours after reports of Israeli airstrikes in Isfahan and Lorstan, which allegedly killed senior Iranian commanders. This morning's retaliation was swift, brutal, and symbolic. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about sending a message. Inside Israel's defense ministry, the mood was tense. Analysts pored over satellite data, intercepted communications, and radar logs, trying to piece together how Iran had managed to breach one of the most fortified zones in the country. The Mossad headquarters wasn't just a building, it was a symbol. For decades, it represented Israel's reach, its intelligence dominance, and its ability to strike anywhere, anytime. That symbol now lay in ruins. Iran's strike wasn't random. It was calculated, targeting not just infrastructure but morale. The missiles were launched from western Iran, likely from underground silos near Kermanshah, and traveled low to avoid early detection. Military experts noted the use of advanced propulsion systems and evasive flight paths, technology that hadn't been seen in previous Iranian attacks. This wasn't a show of force. It was a demonstration of evolution. In Jerusalem, Prime Minister Netanyahu convened an emergency cabinet meeting. The rhetoric was fiery. "We will respond with overwhelming force," he declared, though no specifics were given. Meanwhile, social media exploded with footage, some real, some doctored, showing the aftermath of the strike. One clip, verified by journalists, showed a convoy of armored vehicles entering the damaged compound, suggesting a rapid containment operation. International reaction was swift. The United States condemned the attack, calling it an unacceptable escalation, while Russia urged restraint. In Tehran, celebrations erupted in the streets. State television aired footage of citizens waving flags and chanting slogans. For them, this was vindication, a strike against what they saw as unchecked Israeli aggression. But beneath the surface, both nations knew the stakes had changed. This wasn't just tit for tat. It was a shift in the balance of covert warfare. And for the first time in years, Israel's intelligence apparatus looked vulnerable. As the dust settled over Tel Aviv, the psychological impact of the strike began to ripple through Israeli society. News outlets, though restrained by military censorship, hinted at the scale of the breach. Former intelligence officials appeared on television, their faces tight with concern, acknowledging that this was not just a tactical hit, it was a strategic embarrassment. For a nation that prides itself on preemptive strength, being caught off guard at the heart of its intelligence network was a bitter pill. Meanwhile, inside Mossad's damaged facility, recovery operations were underway. Sources close to the agency confirmed that several key systems had been taken offline, and backup protocols were being activated. The building itself, reinforced against conventional attacks, had absorbed much of the blast, but the symbolic damage was harder to contain. The agency's operatives, many of whom work in deep cover abroad, now faced heightened risk. Iran's message was clear: "We know where you are, and we can reach you." In Tehran, the narrative was triumphant. Iranian media framed the strike as a defensive act, a response to years of covert Israeli operations that had targeted nuclear scientists, military commanders, and infrastructure. Analysts noted that the timing, just days before a major diplomatic summit in Istanbul, was likely intended to shift global attention and force a recalibration of alliances. Back in Israel, the public response was mixed. Some called for immediate retaliation, others urged caution. The memory of past escalations loomed large, conflicts that spiraled out of control, drawing in regional powers and costing civilian lives. But one thing was certain: the illusion of invincibility had been shattered. And in the halls of power, the question wasn't just how to respond, but how to rebuild trust in the system that had failed to see this coming. By midday, Israel's military had begun mobilizing. Fighter jets roared overhead, heading north toward Lebanon and Syria, regions often used as staging grounds for Iranian proxies. The IDF released a statement confirming strategic readiness, though it stopped short of announcing a counterstrike. Still, the message was clear: retaliation was not a matter of if, but when. Inside Mossad's temporary command center, relocated to a secure bunker outside Jerusalem, the atmosphere was clinical. Analysts worked in shifts, cross-referencing intercepted signals and satellite imagery. The priority was identifying the launch sites and assessing whether Iranian operatives had help from regional allies. Hezbollah, long suspected of coordinating with Tehran, had gone silent. That silence was telling. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Donald Trump addressed the situation in a televised briefing. "Israel has the full support of the United States," he said, flanked by military advisors. Sanctions against Iran were expanded within hours, targeting aerospace firms and defense contractors believed to be involved in the missile program. The diplomatic machinery was in motion, but on the ground, tensions were escalating faster than policy could keep up. In the streets of Tel Aviv, life resumed with a strange mix of defiance and dread. Cafes reopened, children returned to school, but the shadow of vulnerability lingered. For many, the attack wasn't just about Mossad, it was about the fragility of normalcy. The idea that a foreign power could strike so deep, so precisely, had shaken public confidence. And yet, beneath the surface, there was resolve. Israel had been here before. It had rebuilt after worse. But this time, the enemy hadn't just knocked on the door, they'd walked through it. And that meant the next move would be decisive, not just for Israel, but for the region. As night fell over the region, the silence was deceptive. Beneath the surface, both nations were recalibrating. In Israel, cyber units worked overtime, scanning for vulnerabilities, probing Iranian networks, and preparing digital countermeasures. Mossad's leadership, though shaken, was already shifting gears, reassigning operatives, encrypting communications, and initiating contingency protocols. The agency's resilience wasn't just in its infrastructure, it was in its adaptability. Iran, meanwhile, basked in the glow of its success. The strike had achieved more than physical damage, it had shifted the psychological terrain. For years, Tehran had played defense, absorbing blows from Israeli intelligence operations. Today, it had flipped the script. The message to its adversaries was unmistakable. Iran could strike deep, and it could strike smart. But the broader implications were more complex. Regional powers watched closely. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, all recalibrated their diplomatic posture. The Gulf states, traditionally wary of Iran's ambitions, now faced a new reality: a more assertive Tehran, emboldened by precision and reach. In Washington, policymakers debated next steps. Military advisors warned against escalation, while intelligence chiefs urged tighter coordination with Israeli counterparts. Back in Tel Aviv, the streets were quiet. The adrenaline of the morning had faded into reflection. Families gathered around televisions, watching updates, listening to analysts, and wondering what tomorrow would bring. For many, the attack was a wake-up call, not just about national security, but about the fragility of peace. And yet, amid the uncertainty, there was resolve. Israel had been wounded, but not broken. Mossad had been hit, but not silenced. The next chapter would not be written in fear, but in strategy. And as both nations braced for what came next, one truth remained. The shadows of intelligence warfare had grown darker, and the stakes had never been higher.